Good day and welcome to Obidatti Family TV. This is Diaspora Diaries and my name is P. Catch. With me in the studio today is my co-host.
My name is Ife Grace and you're welcome to Diaspora Diaries.
Yes, you're welcome once again to the program Diaspora Diaries on Obidatti Family TV. With 3 days to the presidential elections, the Nigerian people are gearing up to what will be a history in the making in the Nigerian political scene. In 3 days' time, Saturday, 25th of February, we'll be going out to vote for the next president and vice president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Diaspora Diary is a program where we get to talk to Nigerians in the diaspora about the role they are playing in the upcoming elections. All right, we have one Nigerian in the diaspora in the United States of America, to be precise, Arkansas. All the way from Arkansas, we have Mr. Planksat. Mr. Planksat James Millaham is a public health researcher. You're welcome to the program, Mr. Plank.
Thank you. It's Blancat, but you can just call me PK, and that is fine.
PK, okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
And thank you for having me on the show.
You're welcome. Okay, so we want to know this coming elections, for the presidential elections, who are you supporting to be the next president of Nigeria, and why are you supporting that person?
Well, I'm strongly behind the candidacy of Peter Obi and Yusuf Dati Baba Ahmed. And that is because for reasons that I think are supposed to be obvious to everyone, but apparently isn't. Obi stands the best chance to actually deliver Nigeria and, put Nigeria back on the right track. He has a track record of success. Track record of success is actually, in trying to revamp situations of estates, for example, right? We have seen what he did in Anambra State, where he revitalized the educational sector in Anambra State. He was able to improve the health systems, and I'm a health enthusiast, as you've mentioned. And those are the kind of things that interest me. I want people who can develop human capital, not necessarily people who are trying to get into power to empower their own selves and the people around them. So I want someone who is going to work for every Nigerian and all Nigerians. And I think the person who is going to do that is Peter Obi, obviously.
Okay. We have, for the first time in Nigeria, a 3-horse race, where we have about three major people headlining the contest. All right, we have the candidate of APC, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the candidate of PDP, Atiku Abubakar, and of course the candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi. And it's going to be a keenly contested race. What do you think makes Mr. Peter Obi stand out from these other two candidates?
So when you say stand out, are you talking about his qualities as a person and as a politician, or stand out in terms of what are the strongholds and the strengths that he has and his probability of winning the election?
You can speak to both. What makes him stand out as a person, and as a politician?
Okay, again, just to backtrack and mention one of the things that I talked about, I feel that he is the most interested in human capital development. And I think that makes him stand out. That is one of the things that has brought him closer to the masses and the people at the grassroots, right? So while the two other candidates are playing elitist type politics, where they are reaching out to the people at the highest ranks and trying to get them to influence their followers, Obi is directly reaching out to the followers who are going to be the determinants of who becomes president. So he understands people who are, at the lowest levels, and he actually understands people from every level, because Peter Obi is also a billionaire. People forget this. They think he is someone because he's modest and humble. He's at the lower levels of economic classes, but he is not. So he has relationships with everyone. but he has chosen to leverage the relationships that he has started having with people at the grassroots and people who are even at the lowest levels. And I think that's, is his selling points. That is what is going to make him stand out in terms of the possibility and the probability of winning the elections. And again, sorry, want to say something?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. Again, we Nigeria, or we Nigerians, are a diverse collection of people, right? We essentially cannot ignore the fact that, based on the political trends that we have observed from 1999 to date, that is the Fourth Republic. There hasn't been, as much equity and as much leverage of diversity that we have, right? And I'm talking about this specifically in the sense of the fact that we have had presidents come from two of the major ethnic groups in Nigeria, and we haven't had a representation from the Igbos. And I think that, aside from the fact that Obi stands out clearly in terms of qualities, heads and shoulders above every other candidate that's running against him, I also feel like if we are to be equitable, the right way to chart is to actually support an Obi candidacy. And I think that is another thing that's going to add to his potential and his likelihood of winning the election.
Interesting. All right, let's talk about the role the diasporans are playing in these upcoming elections. We are aware of the large followership that Mr. Peter Obi and the Labour Party have garnered abroad. What are you doing as an individual and as a Nigerian in the diaspora? What are you contributing to the victory of Peter Obi and Yusuf Dati in these elections?
Well, I would say I'm contributing both tangible and intangible support. For intangible support, I mean just contributing my voice, right? Speaking up on social media. I'm very, very active on Twitter, and I have consistently, since over the last 1 year, lent my voice towards, the propagation of an OB candidacy. I have directly spoken to members of my family, extended and nuclear, because for me, that is my primary constituency, right? I always tell myself this from the 2015 election, when I started actively participating in Nigerian politics, that if at all I'm going to do the various minimum, for my candidate, it is to win my constituency. And my constituency consists of my parents, my brothers, my uncles, my aunts, their kids, and everyone who is of voting age within that familial circle. But so I've done that, lent my voice, spoken to people consistently. Just today or earlier yesterday, I had a conversation with these two brothers who were ardent supporters of Atiku, and at the end of the conversation, we were able to come to a middle ground where we agreed that these two people, for at least amongst both of us, are people that we're going to consider. But then Obi, I would say, has been etched in their minds, and I'm sure that with further persuasion, they are most likely going to lean towards voting for Peter Obi. So these are the things that I'm doing in terms of intangible efforts. For tangible efforts, I have contributed money to support groups. I have contributed in terms of strategy development and just designing back to Nigeria to vote, whether for Peter Obi, Tinubu, and Atiku. And I think, that is just an indication that the diaspora is really taking this seriously. I know that people have traveled back home in the past to vote. But if you remember, in 2015 and 2019, elections were postponed. And with those kind of uncertainties, and also with the tension that is that is consistently getting higher in Nigeria, you'd expect people in diaspora to be more cautious about traveling and be more careful, and even be resistant towards traveling back home. But even with all these factors, people are still traveling. So it says a lot.
Yeah, PK, you made mention of being able to convince two brothers concerning their votes. A lot of Nigerians here have not actually been convinced enough. What more do you think those living in the diaspora can actually do to make sure that these people are convinced enough to vote for Mr. Peter Obi?
Well, I mean, people back home would watch movies and watch the news and see how functional, how efficient systems are outside Nigeria. But I think when people in the diaspora, especially people who are working and living in these systems, these working systems, provide their own anecdotal angles to people back home and try to, personalize how you have lived and you have understood how the systems work. So, for example, one of the things that I do is just to compare my stay in Nigeria and my stay here in the US. I schooled in Nigeria. I worked in Nigeria for several years before I even decided to come over here to the US. So I have experience in education and in the working and in the job markets, both in Nigeria and in the US. And so when I'm talking to people, I try to create this very clear contrast and make them understand that the pathway that we are currently on and the pathway that we might continually be on if we go the route of a Tinubu or the route of an Atiku is not the pathway that's going to take Nigeria from where it is to where these other systems are. So I think that's personalization of the story, right, helps to add an edge and some sort of value to the people you're convincing, especially when you're talking to them on a personal level, on the level of one being your friend or one being your brother or one being, a relative of yours. So I would say these last minutes calls have to go back home. Like a lot of people need to make those calls. And one thing I'm proud of myself for doing is just making those calls. There are people that I know I would talk to and might never even listen to what I have to say, about Peter Obi, but I still talk to them because talking to them at least softens them. If I see someone who is talking too much, for example, on social media, and I'm like, this person, you cannot be, propagating all these lies against Peter Obi. I call them. I say, I know that you are not going to support Peter Obi, or you are not likely to support Peter Obi, but you need to understand that, your approach towards your support for a candidate isn't the right way. And since I'm talking to that person as a friend, it softens them a little bit. So it's essentially trying to dilute the negative narrative while also at the same time trying to convince people to support the candidacy of Peter Obi. So what I would say in summary is I think the diaspora, if there are still grounds to be covered and for people in the diaspora, if there are still grounds to be covered back home, try to cover those grounds in the next few days to the election.
Okay, that's absolutely great. I agree with you. My second question is, when it comes to elections, some Nigerians here does not actually know the importance of elections. So now my question is, what roles do election play in the life of Nigerian citizens, knowing fully well that they're actually participating in a democratic process?
So the impact of the election on Nigerians
Yeah, and
I would
what
say,
roles do election play?
yeah, I mean, elections are essentially the foundations of our government. We're in a democratic system, so the only way we can lead ourselves is through a democratic process, and elections are one of them. So essentially, the basis of elections is to help with self-governance, and so that's alone says a lot. So in terms of all the different, instead of developing all the different sectors that leaders, do, like education, health, infrastructure, all those other things. A good leader is the only person that can improve all those systems. And to get a good leader or a working leader, you have to go through the electoral process. So essentially, elections are, the foundation of our development and our leadership. So I would say that's the essence of elections. But you had mentioned that a few people or some people back home still don't understand this essence. And I'm not going to make an excuse for them, but I feel like some people's experience has actually been very, very pivotal in undermining the value of elections to them. For example, there are people who have consistently voted in polling units that were marred by either electoral violence or some form of electoral fraud. And so those are the kind of people you would hear maybe say things like, my votes do not count. And essentially, one way to go about that is just to consistently and continuously educate them about how important their votes are. But then just me pointing out that for some of the people who have these stories to tell, they are telling stories about their realities. And we need to understand that if we would want to convince them to understand that election and the voting systems can actually work for them.
Okay, still on diaspora voting.
Yeah, redesign policy. I would say it is a very serious issue that we haven't still been able to fully understand at the moment. And that's just because, for one, this is the first time that we are having to exchange our old notes for new notes within such a short period of time. But, one of the things that has come out to us clearly is the fact that the redesign policy does not favor the elite, because we've seen and heard them cry and, show their dissatisfaction towards the policy that Buhari came up with. For example, someone like Governor El-Rufai of Kaduna State, who has been silent over the years when the people, his constituents, have been killed, massacred, women, children, elderly people, hasn't said a thing about all those massacres. He's coming to talk about redesign policy. And they come with this facade that the redesign policy is affecting those who are impoverished, and is making life worse for people in the lowest socioeconomic class. I do agree that the Naira redesign policy has placed hardship on people across the board, but I feel that, and Buhari stated this, it is targeted also towards people who have been hoarding money for electoral fraud and vote buying. So I think one way that this could affect the election is to just help us clean up our system a little bit, ensure that we curb the epidemic of vote buying that has continuously distorted electoral results. So I would say it's a welcome development. But then almost every welcome development has its own disadvantages, right? And we are seeing some of those disadvantages, which is affecting the common man. But also, I think the elites are the ones that are worst hit by this. Because if you look and hear what Buhari said, I think at least 70% of Nigeria's hard cash is outside the bank, is in circulation outside the bank. The common person is not the one hoarding 70% of our cash. It is not the man who is a cobbler on the streets or the bus conductor who tries to make 2,000 every day. It is not that person. It is the elites that are hoarding all the hard cash. And so we are seeing that this crunch is affecting them the most. And so I'm just really excited that I would love to see how this plays out in reality during the elections. But I would say, based on what I see, is going to help us curb the menace of vote buying.
Interesting. Let's get to the internal wranglings in the APC now. So shortly after the CBN policy was announced, we saw the governors, APC governors, led by the governor of Kaduna State, El-Rufai, and of course, Yahaya Bello of Kogi State, sue the federal government. They took the federal government to the Supreme Court to challenge the decision to swap the old notes for the new Naira notes. What would you make of the internal disputes going on presently between the APC governors and the federal government, and even the APC presidential candidate Tinubu on one of his campaign trails, accused the federal government of, putting hardship upon the people, and even brought up the fuel scarcity issues and all of that. Would you say that the APC is divided at this point?
Oh yes, the APC is clearly divided. I mean, why, for example, would sitting APC governors, sue the government that is being led by their own party? So there's clearly a divide, and I think the implications of that for people like us who are supporting Peter Obi is the fact that we are overjoyed that the people who think are the biggest threat to democracy are having their own internal squabble, right? And so as they try to face inward to solve their problems, the energy that they could have used to gain more grounds is being lost, and we are happy for that. We want El-Rufai and Buhari and Yahya Bello and the 10 other APC governors that are trying to sue the government to just continue on that path. Be distracted by that. Let us do the electoral ground running while they focus on all those irregularities they're trying to handle. And this again just buttresses the fact that the Naira design policy is hitting harder on the elite. And you can see that they are taking very, very desperate moves. For example, I'm not a specialist in law, but I know that the approach that they took has some of its irregularities. They went directly to the Supreme Court to challenge the orders of the president. Typically, cases like that, or every other case, typically we start from a ground level, right? You would take it to a certain court, and then it goes to the appeal court, and it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has the final say. So that desperate approach tells you that the rift in APC is very, very serious, and they are trying to take very serious, desperate measures to solve them. And I'm very, very happy that they are doing that, and I'm very happy that they have that conflict within them, because those are the two parties that we call the twins of the destruction of Nigeria. The PDP is also having theirs. Wike and his G5 governors fighting against Atiku and the remaining of PDP. And these are the kind of weaknesses that we saw in 2015 that led to the defeat of President Goodluck Jonathan. So I'm happy that they're having these internal conflicts, and I hope it continues to after the election.
Do you think President Muhammad Buhari is really dedicated in ensuring that the election is free and fair, or do you think he has an ulterior motive or probably an agenda in these elections?
That is a very important question, and it is also very sensitive, I must say. And it makes me really think about what the possible outcomes could be after 25th of February. And you can see that I'm actually approaching this question with a very solemn tone, because I have seen what has been happening in Nigeria, and I think that people are actually thinking of just the elections, but the skeptic in me thinks even outside just the elections, right? So to the question, does Buhari have good intentions? I think what he is showing to Nigerians is that he does have good intentions, and I'm very, very emphatic about showing. So he's showing Nigerians that he is interested in having a free and fair elections, and that's one of the reasons why he brought in the Naira redesign policy. He is showing Nigerians that he's interested in having a free and fair election, and that's why over the past week we have seen military boots being deployed to several states, especially states that have the potential of crisis. But then if you look at the deployment of military presence, that can actually have its own dire consequences if you really, really think about it. I mean, look at what happened on October 20th, 2020, when the military was deployed to go enforce a curfew. Like the military was deployed to go enforce a curfew in Lagos, and people ended up getting killed. That first of all isn't the job of the military. And same with election security. That isn't the primary role of the military, right? And we have to admit that. But then having military presence in those types of situations have their advantages. I'm not going to lie, right? They would help us to secure the process, but I'm also a little bit skeptical that some of the outcomes that might result from that might not be very favorable. And I'm just going to end my response at that.
All right. All right. We really hope that everything comes out well and there'll be less violence on election day. All right, we're going to go on a very short break now. We are still talking to Plankat James Millaham all the way from the USA. When we come back from this break, we'll continue with the conversation. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Labour Party, Labour Party, Labour Party, Labour Party, LP, can you get a vote? Labour Party, Labour Party, LP, can you get a vote? Labour Party, Labour Party, Labour say, Mama Papa na want, Labour Party, Mama Papa na want, Labour say, Mama Papa na want to be Labour Party, Mama Papa na want to be Labour Party.
Mr. Peter Obi's administration built from scratch Chukwuemeka Odumegwu University Teaching Hospital with 25 building structures. His government funded transformation of massive infrastructural development, accreditation of 12 health institutions and 2 hospitals, and also built 10 maternal and childcare centers across the state. He is the first governor to purchase medical equipment worth over 135 million naira and 50 ambulances for the health sector in Anambra State, which remain functional till today. He built and equipped Dr. Jonwilo Heart Center in St. Joseph Hospital, Adazinnuku, where heart operations are performed. Anambra State is the first state in Nigeria to distribute more than 30,000 computers to secondary schools. Mr. Peter Obi distributed about 700 buses to secondary schools in Anambra State and built 200 primary school blocks. He donated the sum of 300 million naira to Anglican churches and 440 million naira to Roman Catholic churches to rehabilitate their missionary schools. During his tenure, he gave 1 million naira each to more than 160 first-class graduates. To promote the reading culture in the state, he went ahead to build a well-equipped.
You're welcome back to the program Diaspora Diaries on Obidatti Family TV. Before the break, we were talking to Plankat James Millaham all the way from the USA. He is a public health researcher and, of course, an obedient person. All right, Mr. Plankat, I'm going to ask you, where are you from? What part of Nigeria are you from?
I'm from Mangu local government of Plateau State. And the name of my ethnicity is Magavo. So I'm a Magavo person from Mangu local government in Plateau State.
Interesting. That's in the north central, I suppose.
Yes, it is in the north central. We also call ourselves the middle belt and stuff.
Okay. All right. Talking about the middle belt, just a few days ago, we saw the governor of Benue State, Samuel Otom, come out to declare support for Mr. Peter Obi, and where he mentioned that this time around we are not voting for a party. It's not about a political party, that the PDP, ABC, political parties in Nigeria in general have failed Nigerians, and now it's about the individual. All right, now I want to know, what do you think the Northerners, not just North Central, I'm talking about the Northeast, Northwest, how do you think Peter Obi is perceived in the North?
Well, first, thank you for just making that distinction, because a lot of times people have conversations and they just talk about the North as if the North is a monolith. And people need to understand that there are 3 geographical regions in the North. There's the Northeast, the Northwest, and the North Central, as you had mentioned. And not just that, there is this, I would say, dichotomy that you can that if you are very keen, you would understand in the north. So, for example, some people would say that there is the up north and then there is the middle belt, right? And others might say that there is the Sharia north and then there is the non-Sharia north or the middle belt. So just on trying to understand these intricacies is the first thing that you need to do before you ask yourself the question of how is OB perceived. So we know that when Obi went on his campaign rallies across the states in the 3 different geopolitical zones in the north, he had people come out for them. And in some of those states, I was actually surprised by the number of people that actually came out to support Peter Obi, because I know just being able to observe elections and rallies and electoral process in Nigeria, I know how, people are mobilized for those kind of gatherings. In a lot of cases, money is spent, and, we know our mantra in Labour Party is, they give shishi. And we know that that is very, very applicable even when it comes to rallies. And so it was surprising seeing people come out to support Peter Obi in mass out of, their love for the candidates, even across the northern states. And I would say that Peter Obi has a good standing with a lot of people in the northern region of Nigeria. He might not be the most popular candidate across the region, but I can tell you specifically for a fact that in states like Plateau State, Nasarawa State, Benue State, Taraba State, the FCT, Obi is going to have, or Obi has strongholds in those states, right? I am calling a win for Obi in Plateau State, calling a definite win for Obi in Benue, a very, very high likelihood of an Obi win in Nasarawa State and Taraba State. And I would say, if I'm being plain safe, I would say Obi is very, very most likely to also clinch the FCT, right? And those territories and states are within the northern region of Nigeria. But when you go farther north to where there is a higher, I would say, Muslim presence, right? The likelihood of him winning is less, just because we have seen over the past few days sheikhs and imams gathering to endorse the candidacies of Atiku and Tinubu. So we are not going, personally, I would not say we, personally, I'm not going to rely so much on what is going to happen in those states. But I'm confident that even amongst the remaining states, Obi is still going to have his 25% in a good number of states. I can brag that in Kaduna State, for example, it is very, very likely to happen in Gombe State, in Adamawa State, and maybe even in Borno State. So let us see how it goes. But my predictions are that Obi is very, very likely to get his 25% in 2/3 of the states across Nigeria, which is one of the requirements for being elected president.
Yeah, PK, that's great. Having talked about the role in the Diaspora voting, let's talk about the INEC now. Do you think the INEC is ready to deliver a free and fair result after 25th of February?
Well, I'm very, very indifferent when it comes to INEC, to be honest. I neither hate or love INEC, and I do not know why. That is because I have seen the goodness in INEC, and I've also seen the worst of INEC. And so I feel that with the way the presidency has played its cards, there's a very high chance that INEC is going to present us with a free and fair elections and free and fair results. Or I would say results that are free of any form of manipulation. I think that there's a very high likelihood of that happening. And that's just because of the fact that when the head, right, is going towards a certain direction, it is very unlikely for other parts of the body to, I would say, misbehave. So we have seen the position that Buhari has taken towards this election. I am very, very, I'm very, very, um, how would I say this now? I just think it's very unlikely that Mahmoud is going to play cards that are going to fall outside the purview of what President Buhari is doing. So let's see how it goes. But I think as a person who is very indifferent towards INEC, I really do hope that they play this freely and fairly. But I also think that there is a likelihood that they are going to do so.
All right. All right.
And just to add one more thing, sorry,
go ahead.
Just to add one more thing about INEC. With the amendments that has been, put in place before the elections, they had reviews of their electoral laws, and we have seen a lot of those laws are actually favoring a free and fair election, like the introduction of the BVAS and certain other policies. So I would say INEC is pretty much on the track to, presenting us with a free and fair election. And I really do hope that it turns out that way.
Okay. Away from the INEC and the elections now, there is another monster that Nigerians need to be aware of, and that is the judicial system. Because the way things are now looking, it seems as if it's the courts that have the final say in our elections. All right, we already heard recently that some judges have been denied access to the USA. They've been denied visas to the USA because of, ill practices. Now, should we be afraid of the judicial system, especially the Supreme Court, as they have the final says to some of these electoral processes?
Yes, I think we should be afraid of the Supreme Court. I mean, the members of the Supreme Court and those judges are appointed. They are appointed by by a sitting member of a political party. So I would expect in most cases that they are going to be very, very partisan or political in a certain way. And this is not the first time that we are seeing people that are supposed to be independent being partisan or being playing politics. For example, we saw even the CBN governor at some point was trying to run for president. So for me, it is, yes, be very scared of the Supreme Court and the judicial system. This is not over the years, we have seen judges being hounded by the DSS for being a national security threat. So yes, be scared of the Supreme Court, but at the same time, let us try to make sure that we are applying constructive pressure rather than destructive pressure. I love it when citizens band together and try to apply some pressure to the leadership, but I really do not like situations where this gatherings turn violent. So I think we need to be very focused and we need to apply the right kind of pressure, and I think they will yield if we apply the right kind of pressure in case they are trying to veer off the right path.
Okay. I really hope so. Finally now, I'd like you to tell us, how do you see these elections playing out? Do you see this ending at the first ballot, or do you see a runoff? Do you foresee a Supreme Court case eventually? How do you see this election playing out?
I do not know. Let me start answering from the last part. I do not know if it might eventually get to the Supreme Court, but I know for a fact that there are going to be election tribunals that would spring up after the elections. I think people are going to take their grudges to election tribunals, and they are going to have some sort of decision whether it should be moved forward to the courts or it should be terminated. Now, the important question, which is how do I perceive this election panning out? As an obedient who is very, very hopeful for a new Nigeria,
Mm.
I do think that Peter Obi has a very good chance at winning it at the first ballot. I do strongly believe that. And that is me speaking as an obedience. Me now speaking as a realist, right? I'm considering the fact that I'm considering the possibility of two things happening. One, Peter Obi winning this election at the first ballot, but then something that also has an equal chance of happening is a runoff. Now, for the runoff, I'm almost certain that Peter Obi is going to make it to that runoff round. And if you remember, if you recall from INEC laws, the runoff is going to be between two people, and I've seen people misunderstand this. The runoff is going to be between two people: the person who has the highest number of votes, and the person who has the majority of votes in the highest number of states. So it's the person who wins the highest number of votes, and amongst the remaining people, the person who wins the highest number of states.
Yes,
and I think that Obi is going to be eligible for the second round based on one of those two criteria. Now, where it's going to get really fierce and feisty is, you know, who he runs against. If he runs against Tinubu or Atiku, are they going to band? Are they going to band together against him? Because we know that both of them have a stronger relationship than the relationship that we see, whether between Obi and Tinubu or Obi and Atiku. Tinubu and Atiku have been playing politics together in the same vicinity since the 90s, right? So the question is, what happens after that is where, to be honest, I'm very, very unclear about. But I know that things are going to happen and fall into place to allow for Peter Obi to be our president.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Mr. Plankat. It's been wonderful talking to you, and your opinions are quite very, very intelligent. Thank you for joining us on the program today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it, and I did have fun, you know, just talking about this. I'm very, very passionate about, you know, elections. I can literally talk about this for the next 24 hours. Well, I'm really happy.
Okay. We'd like to get your final words. What was your final words now to Nigerians, both people that want to vote for Peter Obi and people that are yet undecided? What are your final words?
Well, for those who want to vote for Peter Obi, I think I cannot reiterate this enough. Please go to your polling units early and ensure there's no manipulation happening prior to the elections. Stay in line, be very peaceful while you stay in line, be very peaceful, be very cordial, be very respectful of other people's opinions while you stay in line to vote. Vote, which is the third thing. Fourth thing is stay back and protect your votes, which is essentially make sure that votes are counted and they are counted within the view of everyone, and that they are uploaded and the summaries are written up and signed before you leave the polling unit. And I did this. I did this in 2015 and 2019. I remember in 2019, I left my polling unit around 3 a.m. That's when we were able to finish collation. But then that is a story for another day. For me, it's just be there, be very participatory in the process, and try to question any illegalities that you sense. But also, please be very, very peaceful. We want you to go out there and vote, but please also make sure that, you know, you are doing it in the most peaceful way. Protect your lives, protect yourselves, protect the lives of people that are around you, and you know, just pray and hope that Peter Obi wins the elections. For those that are undecided, well, Peter Obi is the man for the job, and I think that, you know, once you pay very close attention to their antecedents and you try to, you know, compare them, you see that Peter Obi actually has the best chance of revitalizing Nigeria and putting Nigeria back on its track to greatness. So those
All
are my
right.
closing words. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Blancat. We are totally out of time. Thank you so much for joining the program. We hope to, get victory on Saturday election day. All right, Grace.
Grace. PK, I think you absolutely did a very great job. I love the way you broke everything down.
Yeah.
It's been great so far.
Yes,
And
yes.
before I forget, you absolutely have a lovely smile. That's by the way.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right,
you.
all
Thank
right.
you, Prince and Grace, for having me on the Diaspora Diaries. I really did enjoy contributing my voice, and I hope to speak to you all after the elections to celebrate
Yeah.
our victory.
Exactly. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Grace,
Yeah.
I think there are some things that he mentioned that were quite instructive about the way people should handle themselves on election day.
Yeah.
All right, about voting, ensuring that the votes are counted properly and, transmitted as well, that the right figures are transmitted to the coalition centers, and protect your votes and be there, okay? Because some people will just go there, vote, and disappear.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's important that they
Make sure that your vote is being counted.
exactly, and counted and transmitted and recorded properly. All right, so that's our responsibility as the electorate and as citizens of Nigeria. Okay, so we encourage everybody that have their PVCs to go out on election day. This Saturday, it's happening this Saturday. All right, mobilize your friends, your family members, and everyone, because it's our fight now. It's our responsibility to create the Nigeria of our dreams. And we already have someone, we have a driver, we have a leader that we can trust, okay, to deliver a Nigeria of our dreams. So all we need to do now is to stand by him and support him and vote and vote and vote on election day, all right, and ensure that our vote counts. All right, this is where we're going to wrap it up on today's episode of the program Diaspora Diaries. Just in case you want to participate in the comments, you can reach out to us on any of our social media platforms. We at Obidatti Family TV across all social media platforms. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course we are also on TikTok. All right, so if you want to drop us a comment or an advice or recommendation, you can do that on any of the social media platforms. You can also follow us individually on our social media platforms. Mine is at official PCatch across all social media platforms. What about you, Grace?
Yeah, you can follow me on Facebook at Ife Amar, then Instagram at Signal Empire.
All right, that's it on the program Diaspora Diaries on Obidatti Family TV. Do well to join us again tomorrow at the same time for another interesting round of conversations. Till we come your way again, have a blessed day and always know that a new Nigeria is possible. Bye for now.